Hello students, today we are going to study the overview of the components of a CPU cabinet. One of the important components of a computer system is CPU cabinet, also called as system unit. It contains the processing hardware for the computer as well as few other devices such as disk drives, memory, the power supply and the cooling fans. The inside of a system unit for a typical desktop is shown in the figure. The system unit contains CPU, several types of memory, interfaces to connect external peripheral devices and components all connected through a set of wires called buses on the motherboard. The main circuit board inside the system unit is called the motherboard. The motherboard has a variety of chips and the boards attached to it. Typically, the external devices such as monitor, keyboard, mouse, printers connect to the motherboard through a port. Unless until all these devices have the specific port attached on the motherboard, you cannot connect the device. Essentially, this means that every device in order to connect to the motherboard must have a specific port attached to it. A port is also called a special connector exposed through the exterior of the system unit case. The port is either built directly into the motherboard or it is created via an expansion card inserted into the expansion slot on the motherboard. A wireless device can also be connected to a desktop, but the connection between a wireless device and the motherboard is possible only through a device called transceiver that plugs into the port to transmit data between the device and the motherboard. The central processing unit consists of a circuitry and components packaged together in the form of a single chip plugged into the motherboard. CPU is also called a microprocessor or simply the processor. When the processor is powered up for computation, it dissipates heat. If this heat dissipation is not controlled, it can lead to damage of the CPU. In order to speed up the dissipation process and keep the temperature of the CPU under control and within limits, the fans are mounted on the CPU. Fan is one of the most popular method used to cool the processor since last many years. Another cooling method is to use liquid filled tubes that act as radiators to draw heat away from the processor. These liquid cooling systems are bit expensive, but quieter than fan based conventional system. That means, if the liquid based cooling systems are adopted to cool the processor, not only the dissipation is faster, but also the sound coming out of the computer system of the fan is minimized. You might have heard that when the computer is powered on, so there is some sound inside the desktop which is mostly a fan, but eliminating the fan you will not face any sound inside the desktop when it is under operation. Another important thing in the CPU cabinet other than the motherboard is the expansion card. Most desktop PCs have expansion slots located on the motherboard into which the expansion cards, also called add-in boards, interface cards and adapter boards can be inserted. The expansion cards are used to give the PC additional capabilities such as add network or internet connectivity, or to connect a monitor, or to connect a set of speaker to the computer. Today, many basic and essential capabilities which I have mentioned earlier are built in directly into the motherboard. When this occurs, such as the integrated sound or integrated graphics, an expansion card is not needed. Most new desktop PCs come with a few empty expansion slots on the motherboard, so that new capabilities can be added on the motherboard. For example, accelerator board is used to add specialized chips to speed up the overall processing speed. Disk controller card is used to enable a particular type of hard disk to interface with the PC. A modem card provides communication of a modem with the PC, so that it gets hooked to the internet. A network interface card helps a PC to connect to the network. A sound card enables user to attach speakers to the PC and provides sound capabilities. A TV tuner card allows a PC to pick up the television signal. That means, using a TV tuner card, a desktop monitor can be converted into a TV set and a large number of TV programs can be viewed over the desktop. A USB or FireWire card is used to provide a USB or FireWire port to the PC. Earlier, there were old motherboards, the USB capability was not available. So, in order to attach the USB devices, the USB port was made available to the desktop through this expansion cards only. Using this USB card, it was possible to attach the USB devices to the old desktops, but nowadays this USB ports are directly available on the motherboard, so that you need not attach an extra card to it, as I mentioned earlier. The video capture board allows the video images to be captured into the PC using a video camera. A video graphics board, another card, board or card is the terminology, same terminology, provide additional graphics capability to the computers. Next, every CPU cabinet has large number of ports attached to it. Ports are the connectors located on the exterior of the system unit that are used to connect external hardware devices. Each port is attached to the appropriate bus on the motherboard, so that when a device is plugged into the port, the device can communicate with the CPU. The typical ports of a desktop are shown on the cabinet. As shown, there are unique connectors for each type of port on the computer system. When connecting cables on the system unit, it is important to consider the connector gender, pin count and pin configuration. These days, when an external device is connected over a port, the operating system self configures that device and connects it to computer system for usage. USB and FireWire ports are the example of the same. Some of the commonly used ports are serial ports, parallel port, network port, keyboard and mouse port, monitor port, modem phone port, SCSI port, MIDI port, IRDA port, game port, USB port. Some of the oldest are now referred as the legacy port and are slowly being phased out in new desktops. Serial port and parallel ports are few examples of the legacy ports. They were found in the earlier desktops, but these days it is difficult to find a serial port on a modern desktop. Serial ports can transmit data only a single bit at a time through a single inexpensive wire. Serial ports are used for slow speed devices such as keyboards, mouse and old modems. Nowadays, the keyboard and mouse are connected over PS2 port. The another port is a parallel port. The parallel port can transmit data 1 byte at a time and therefore, is at least 8 times faster than the serial port. In the earlier days, the parallel ports were used for connecting printers to the desktop. The cables so designed for the parallel transmission in the parallel port are expensive and cannot send data reliably beyond 50 feet. Because of these disadvantages of the parallel port, these days even the printers are connected to the desktop using the USB port, which is more common today. The another type of port is a network port. A network port is used to connect a PC to the local area network. Most network cards contain a port that accepts a RJ45 connector, which looks similar to a telephone connector, but looks larger. So, as I explained that network cards are connected through a port that accepts a RJ45 connector. The coaxial cables or fiber optic connectors can be used for network connections. The keyboard and mouse use PS2 connector. However, some keyboard and mouse also use USB connector. So, in some especially in some of the laptops, the keyboards and mouse are connected over the USB port, but in most of the desktops the keyboard and mouse are connected through the PS2 ports. The monitor port is used to connect a monitor to the PC. Also, the multimedia projection system is connected to the PC using the monitor port only. Some computers also come with an S-video port that can be used to connect the computer to a television. The modem and phone port are used to connect the PC to a phone outlet and connect a telephone to the phone jack respectively. The SCSI ports are high speed parallel ports generally used to attach printers, scanners and hard disk devices. So, these SCSI ports are also used for high speed parallel transmission between the device and the desktop, and devices like printers, scanners and hard devices need high speed transfer of data, and therefore, the SCSI ports are common in all these devices. A MIDI port is used to connect MIDI device. The full form of a MIDI device is musical instrument digital interface, and this MIDI port is used to connect a MIDI device to the computer. MIDI devices include music keyboards and other instruments that can be connected to the computer to compose music to be stored electronically. Another important port which is used nowadays is IRDA. The full form of IRDA is Infrared Data Association Port, that receives infrared transmission from devices such as wireless keyboard, wireless mouse and portable devices. But in the infrared ports, the keyboard or mouse must be placed right in front of the port for appropriate transmission, for error free transmission. So, in the earlier desktops, the IRDA port was very common, but nowadays that IRDA port has been replaced by another wireless port, in which the line of sight is not important. It is not necessary for us to keep the keyboard or mouse right in front of the port, and that port is the Bluetooth port. Using the Bluetooth port, it is possible to transfer data between device and computer over wireless. The Bluetooth technology makes use of radio waves to transmit data between devices. Another important port which is available on the desktop on the CPU cabinet is a game port. A game port is used to connect a joystick, gamepad, steering wheel or other devices which are commonly used for gaming applications, which are commonly used for computer game programs. So, using a game port, these devices can be connected, and these devices provide interfaces for development of the computer games. Another important port which is nowadays available on the desktop is the USB port. The USB ports are used to connect USB devices to the computer, and now USB port is becoming standard. Most of the devices have now USB interface and are connected using the USB port to the desktop, and that is the reason nowadays every PC, the new and modern desktops, come with 3 to 4 USB ports, so as to connect simultaneously 3 to 4 USB devices. The USB devices are hot swappable. That means, they can be attached or removed while the computer is turned on. In the earlier days, using the parallel port, this was the risk that in order to remove the device from the computer, first you should power off the printer so as to disconnect the computer from the printer if it is a parallel port. But using a USB port, you can even remove the USB device even when it is power on. Another important port is the FireWire port. The FireWire ports are used to connect FireWire devices to the computer. Similar to USB, a FireWire hub can also be used to connect multiple devices to a single port, and FireWire devices also are hot swappable like USB ports. So, this was all about the description of the expansion slots and the various ports. Regarding the outer layer of a computer cabinet, the computer cabinet usually consists of a sheet metal enclosure, and sheet metal enclosure is important to protect all the motherboard and expansion slots from expansion boards, from dust, pollution or even any red bites also. Another important component which is there inside a computer desktop is the power supply unit. So far we have discussed the CPU cabinet, motherboard, expansion slots, expansion cards and the various ports which are there on the desktop. Other than the various ports, most cabinet also have a power cabinet, power button or a switch, a reset button and LEDs to indicate the power status as well as hard drive and network activity. Some cabinets include built-in I/O ports such as USB and headphone ports on the front of the cabinets. Such cabinets include the wires needed to connect these ports, switches and indicators to the motherboards. The computer cabinets are beneficial because they are a safe place to keep your computer and its accessories. If you properly store your computer and its components in a cabinet, it will be a lot safer from the potential damage that could arise as a result from someone entering your office and touching things. Also, the computer cabinets keep wires and cables discreet and tucked away. So, your office area will look significantly tidier as a result. Also, the cabinet protects the computer from dust and possible biting of rats. Now, let us have a descriptive look on power supply. In the CPU cabinet, also called PSU, is the component which converts the alternating current or AC, that is the electric power, to a low voltage DC power, and different parts of the desktop requires DC voltage of various levels. This DC power is distributed to the internal components of the computer. Some power supplies have a switch, whereas other models have automatic sensors that switch input voltage automatically and are able to accept any voltage between 115 volt and 230 volt. The power supply unit used in computers are nearly always switch mode power supply or SMPS. The SMPS provides regulated direct current at the several voltages required by the motherboard and accessories such as disk drive and cooling fans of the CPU. The more components like hard drives, CD, DVD drives, tape drives, ventilation fins you have in your PC, the greater the power required from the power supply. The first generation microcomputer and home computer power supply units used a heavy step down transformer and linear power supply. The modern computers use switched mode power supplies with a ferrite core high frequency transformer. The switch mode supply is much lighter and less costly and is more efficient and more reliable than an equivalent linear power supply. The computer power supplies may have short circuit protection, overpower or overloaded protection, overload voltage protection, under voltage protection, over current protection and over temperature protection. The recent power supplies have a standby voltage available to allow most of the computer system to be powered off. When the computer is powered down, but the power supply is still on, it can be started remotely via a Wacom LAN or Wacom ring or locally via the keyboard power on or KBPO if the motherboard supports it. Another thing regarding the power supply is the power rating. The power requirements for a modern desktop personal computer may range from 300 watts to more than 500 watts for a high performance computer. If it is a server, sometimes it might require up to 1000 watts of power consumption. The power rating of a PC power is rated by the manufacturer. These days, since the power failures in our country are common, the another device which is attached to the CPU cabinet is a UPS, uninterrupted power supply system, and this UPS is a key system to most of the data centers or the critical systems where power must meet higher availability and quality standards. Considering the frequent power failures, it is very difficult for a desktop to function without an appropriate UPS system. So, UPS systems are also one of the important components or the computer systems nowadays we can call over and above the power supply unit. UPS makers use three fundamental different electrical designs or topologies for their products. This includes the offline UPS, the line interactive UPS and the online UPS. The three differ chiefly in the level of power conditioning provided when the utility power and on the battery power. The offline UPS are the most commonly used on an ordinary desktop systems. The offline UPS, also called a standby UPS, are the ones that wait for a power interruption before taking any action. That means, so far as the power is on, the offline UPS does not come into picture. When the need arises, the power is lost, it turns the inverter on and provides emergency power. An inverter is a device within the UPS that supplies the direct current of the battery into the AC required by most of the IT equipments. The UPS maker sometimes refer to the offline UPS disparagingly as a battery in a box, because it does little more than provide emergency power and provides little or no real power conditioning. In normal use, the offline UPS merely connects the power line directly through to your computer. Its battery charger draws only a slight current to keep the UPS battery topped off. The batteries are in no way linked to your computer, they are switched out of the loop. As its name implies, most of the time the standby power system simply stands by for the power to fall and then take action. When the power falls, however, the offline UPS switches into action, and switch is the keyword. The switching process requires a small but measurable amount of time. It may be in few milliseconds, and it does not affect the normal operation of a personal computer. All the available offline UPS switch quickly enough that your computer never notices the lapse. Most offline UPS switch in 3 to 10 milliseconds. Even the slowest offline UPS has a safety margin when it comes to the switching time. The chief drawback of an offline UPS is that they do not have any power protection feature. Without additional circuitry, the offline UPS affords no protection against spike, surges or even long term over voltage, and its protection against under voltage problems is limited to switching to a battery backup. The next step in the UPS ladder is a line interactive UPS. The major change between the offline and the line interactive design is that the line interactive UPS adds some degree of voltage regulation. That is, the line interactive UPS attempts to correct for voltage fluctuation on your power line and deliver electricity that is somewhat closer to 120 or 240 volts, depending upon what your computer uses, without switching to the battery power. And the third type of UPS is the online UPS. As you see, the term online UPS most typically is synonymous with the term double conversion. Online UPS are so named because the output inverter supplies 100% of the current of the critical load. The name double conversion UPS arises from the operation of the device. It first converts the voltage AC into a battery compatible low voltage DC using circuitry called a rectifier. The rectifier supplies power to the inverter next stage in addition to the charging the batteries. This direct current is then converted by an inverter back into highly controlled and regulated AC. This process will effectively remove any electrical disturbances on the input side of the UPS. The AC sine wave created inside the UPS allows a great deal of control and conditioning over simply filtered AC power as supplied by other UPS called offline UPS or other type of UPS. Another important thing in the UPS is the battery power, and this battery power decides that how much time the UPS will sustain the desktop without failure when the power goes. More is the battery power, for more number of minutes or more number of hours the desktop can function without the power. Other than the type of the UPS, an important component of the UPS is the batteries. The batteries are the reserves built into the UPS. They are the U in the UPS. This alternate source of power keeps your equipment running when the utility power fails. The size and the capacity of the batteries and the current drawn generated by the UPS load determine how long the UPS will run on the battery power when the main power has gone, when the main power has failed. Although there are number of different battery technologies available such as nickel, metal hydride or lithium ion, unless custom manufactured, all UPS batteries are based on lead acid chemistry. The cost is one of the main reasons all the UPS manufacturers go for lead acid batteries. The lead acid batteries cost less for a given amount of energy than any other available battery type. Although this is the same chemistry used in the car batteries and the UPS batteries are not interchangeable. Both are designed for the specific application. The batteries should be considered as a consumable. They have a life expectancy of about 4 to 6 hours, assuming they are maintained properly. There are temperatures higher than 25 degrees centigrade will cause a battery to age faster. Batteries also have short shelf life. That means you cannot keep the batteries on the shelf without continuously charging it or under use. If the batteries are not used for a long time, for some time, the life of the battery may be affected. So, unless the batteries are charged, simple as plugging in the UPS, the batteries will self discharge to the point where they are damaged and permanently lose some of their capacity. These days, a modern UPS also comes with a USB connection to the main desktop. Using the USB interconnection, the desktop can know how much is the battery power remaining and to how much time the desktop can sustain on this battery. The moment the UPS is unable to supply the power to the desktop recognizes that and it automatically starts the shutdown process. So, using the software which is available over the desktop, it detects that the UPS cannot supply the power anymore to the computer and it automatically starts the shutdown process. In another type of UPS, when they do not have such software connection, then a beep sound comes when the power goes from the UPS and that beep sound increases in the last minute when the UPS is unable to supply the power anymore to the desktop. So, in a brief presentation of this 20 to 25 minutes, what I have explained is the details of a CPU cabinet, the details of a motherboard and the associated expansion card and also the number of ports which are attached to the computer system, the power supply button, the reset button and the various types of uninterruptible power supply systems to the which can be attached to a desktop.